Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Talk about something today that affects a lot of us, either personally or people we know, and that is addiction. But it's not necessarily what you might be thinking. Addicted to substances. It could be addictions to food and many other things. And he is somebody who has dealt with that for a long time in terms of helping people. Scott Spiers joins us from Kintsugilifecoaches. Welcome back, Scott. How you doing?
Hi, it's great to be here again.
Good to have you
Sorry,
back.
Julie couldn't make it. She has another job as an executive, and she had to do something with somebody higher up. So yeah.
All good. Good. I'll take one. Can't get both. I'll take one. It's all good. And that's what makes you guys very unique in itself, where there are two coaches
Right.
and they work on different things together. Now, when we talk about addiction, it really can run the gamut to many different areas, right?
Oh yeah. So I mean, it's in the pop culture. I'm addicted to TikTok. I'm addicted to video games. Oh, girl, you're just addicted to men. Um, so yeah, pretty much any behavior taken to excess can be classified, addiction. So as a life coach, that's what I've learned is my experience in the addiction field actually translates to life coaching more often than I thought it would.
Is addicted personality a thing? You always hear that term. Does it exist?
So this is where I'm a lot of fun at parties, because technically, unless I'm missing something, to have an addictive personality, we'd have to quantify it. We'd have to be able to predict it. We'd have to have a list of criteria that they would meet, and we don't. But that's almost like gaslighting because we all know that there are people that they just get hooked onto things or whatever. So in individual cases, sure, but I don't think we're anywhere near ready to put that in as a diagnosis that we
Hmm.
have confidence on treatment. So on the one hand, scientifically, no, I haven't found it. But at the same time, we all know someone who is.
Yes, that's why I brought that up. and close friends. And
Right.
what I observed is that she had substance abuse addictions back in the day,
Mhm.
and that was heroin. But then I noticed that it could be marijuana. Then she could 2 weeks later she could be drinking heavy and can't just have a couple of drinks. It goes deeper. That or I could be a person in her life that she would have like just like an obsessive situation with that person. So I honestly, based on my observations, I think that addictive personalities really do exist.
I think they do. And I know when I was in grad school, a scary statistic is that counselors in recovery, they have about a 10 times more likely to relapse on their drug of choice. But what got my attention was 70% more likely to develop a gambling or a sex addiction.
Wow.
So once
Interesting.
you get hooked on something, but that's not, so addictive personality would be someone's born and they're more likely to go into it. Where somebody who has an existing addiction, oh yeah, you trade one addiction for the other. That happens. That happens. In fact, by definition, that's how you recover. Is you find something less harmful to replace what was killing you. So it can be chocolate, coffee,
Hmm.
church. You find something that you get into at the same intensity.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's bad for you. It's
Right.
just something that helps you cope. Do they call it harm reduction?
Yes. And so harm reduction, I've been in the methadone treatment field off and on for about 12 years. And so with harm reduction, in the methadone clinic, they take the methadone and it gets them stable. It fools the brain into thinking that they have a strong opioid. And then ideally they taper off. But you'd be amazed, methadone within a couple of weeks, once it builds up into the blood, they can have
Hmm.
jobs, regular relationships.
Wow.
Yeah, it works really well.
Let me ask you a question based on harm reduction, and it's on my radar because I know somebody dealing with it with their teenager. In that vaping is so huge right now in schools.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're dealing with it, in terms of your practice.
Oh yeah.
And this person's son admits that he is addicted to THC vaping,
Yeah.
and then went to counseling, and that was the term harm reduction.
Right.
But where I'm going with this is that a reasonable thing for a teenager? Can they actually process the fact that they're cutting back or should be cutting back?
I don't see any reason why not.
Okay,
And again, I don't know the case, so that there's a danger. I don't want to put my license online,
absolutely.
but absolutely. So, working with kids, I think sometimes we underestimate how well kids can process. I mean, we have them driving at 16, you know.
Mm,
A lot of kids are babysitting other kids. At least when I was growing up, 14, 15 years old, they're so they can do it. The scary thing about kids and vaping or anything is the brain doesn't finish forming till you're 25.
yeah.
So if you're vaping, if you're using any substance early on, it the brain rewires and wires itself. So, but yeah, I believe the kids do harm reduction all the time, man. If you think about it, um, a lot of times they start out with fruity pebbles or Captain, the really sugary cereals.
Hmm.
Eventually, usually, they tend to gravitate towards healthier things as they grow up.
Never thought it in that regard, but yeah, all right.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I say fruity pebbles is the original gateway drug because it tastes great and it hits you with that jolt of energy, and then cocoa puffs, and then pop tarts. Ooh, pop tarts. It's funny you mentioned vaping. I went through not THC vaping, but I quit smoking for years. I still use nicotine cessation, and I actually switched to vaping as a safer alternative until COVID hit, and I couldn't ignore the data. So I quit right away.
Wow.
So harm reduction isn't perfect, but if we can lower the danger of what they're doing one step at a time, and there's other things that does, so it builds their confidence. It's like the snowball effect, you start with a really small snowball, then you roll it down a hill, it gets big.
Yep. Yep.
So we learn one thing at a time, and they get more confidence, they prove themselves they can do it, and ideally that's how. And then the ideal of harm reduction is abstinence. I know people don't think that, but that's the goal. We're just very, very patient on how a person gets there.
Yeah, thanks for the insight on that, because I've been hearing it. Friends are talking about it, and again, the THC nicotine vaping in schools, at least I'm in the New York area.
Yeah.
It's you can get it anywhere, everywhere. Yeah, and that's what they're passing it in the hallways and then
Right.
going to class.
And then the government does step in. Government does harm reduction all the time. You can't have an open container in your car. That's harm reduction. And they don't say that you can't have a beer and drive. You just can't have above this amount. So that's harm reduction. And I don't know about
Hmm.
how old you are, but when I was growing up, people smoked in their houses all the time.
Oh yeah.
Walk into the house, you can smell it. I know people that smoke at their own home. They smoke outside, not inside. So that's an example of how harm reduction does work over time. And so they can't sell the fruity vapes anymore to the kids, that they've limited to, I think, tobacco flavor. That's all harm reduction.
Interesting viewpoint. And yes, I do remember my mom smoked Viceroy. Never forget the brand. And then even think back that they allowed smoking on planes. So
Oh
could
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
can you imagine being in this tin can
yeah.
for 3-4 hours and people are just puffing away?
I was in that tin can many times. So yeah, until when did they ban that? At some point at the 60s or 70s,
Mm,
that you couldn't smoke domestic, but you could still smoke international.
I want to go with 70s on that one.
Yeah, yeah. I think we started once we saw our grandparents dying from
Right.
lung cancer. So, but yeah, harm reduction is a valid thing. If you think about it, speed limits, a lot of traffic laws are basically harm reduction. And then as a life coach, the same stuff. We find all sorts of behaviors. So I'm not treating like I would as a licensed pro, but we learn to take a look at those things and see if any of their habits are causing the barriers, which is why they're coming to see a coach.
Interesting. I'm going to digress for just a moment because it was
Please.
a story in the news, and we're talking about addiction here today. But this just happened, I believe it was yesterday, and I'm not sure what state, but it was a cop, female cop, did a traffic stop, had gloves on, like she's done. She even said hundreds of times, 100 times before, and somehow fentanyl got into her bloodstream, somewhere on her skin, somewhere, and dropped her right down as she's making this traffic stop. And she was feeling the effects of it and literally almost died. Fortunately, other officers were on the scene, and there's video out there of what she was going through. And it took 3 doses of Narcan to
Yeah.
bring her back. But they said she was lifeless. She was just about to go. And the reason I bring it up is such a minute amount. Who knows if it was rolled up in a dollar bill and she just took a breath and
Right.
something
Yeah.
just hit her respiratory system. But with addiction, this stuff is being laced in many things.
Oh,
And
it's everywhere. So you can't. I read something last week where a lot of the marijuana that they're catching, so it's still illegal. Yeah, technically, federally, marijuana's laced with it. You can make pills at home. I'm not going to teach you how, but they have the machines, and one of the ways you can tell is if the writing is super distinct. There's a so like the 800 or the ML 800. If it's super clean and distinct, there's a chance that that was a forged pill. So unless you got the medication from a pharmacy, you have no idea where that came from. And not that I want to give you nightmares, but fentanyl is one thing. Then there's carfentanil, which is many times more powerful than fentanyl.
wow.
So you know, when you buy cocaine, when you buy any drug of choice, anything that you want to, was it about a month or two ago in New York? 3 people bought cocaine, and it was actually laced with fentanyl, and they died or ended up in the hospital. So it's
Unbelievable.
brutal out there. It's brutal. There's no such thing as a safe drug. But this fentanyl thing is really really difficult.
I didn't realize how dangerous it is until seeing this video earlier today of this police officer. She's taken every precaution. How it got into her bloodstream, no idea, no idea. But she's got gloves on.
No,
you
bro.
know,
So the glove, but if she wiped, which we're all doing this, right? We all scratch, we wipe our faces. I know this because I'm really into hot chilies, and so when you eat like a Carolina Reaper, you can't put it. So it's just
uh,
habit to do it. So it can be so many ways, and it really is horrifying. I know that there's legislation. Hopefully, it passes, so we can sell Narcan over the counter.
that makes perfect sense. It should be that way. I'm surprised it's not. I thought it was, to be honest with you.
There might be some
I don't
states.
know. Yeah.
I know at the clinics I worked, we gave it away, and when police came over and visited, we always had like 10 or 20 extra Narcan. We always gave them to the police officers and the paramedics. So
You know, you just brought back a thought. It's so prevalent now, substance abuse, even in schools, high schools, that they'll give you drug tests. You just ask them, yeah, can I get a couple of stick tests for my kid? I want to double check. Readily available now. And what does that say?
I know,
We got a
but I
problem.
remember in the 70s, when I was in fifth grade, there were kids that were smoking marijuana. So it's just what's so dangerous now is the marijuana is definitely more potent than it was back then.
Yep.
Part of the reason we have such a drug problem is it sounds flippant, but we have better drugs, and we haven't quite learned the appropriate time and place, for the drugs. Because if you have a headache, what are you going to take, Steve?
Ibuprofen,
Right,
aspirin,
right,
something like
right.
that.
And then if you're feeling anxious, you go to the doctor, you'll get a benzo. If you feel a little depressed, they'll give you something else. So as soon as we feel anything, we go to the drugstore, go to CVS, Walgreens, or that's who we are as a people. And I think we're kind of paying their price.
I 1000% agree with you, Scott. And I don't want to be negative here. There are great psychiatrists out there, but I truly feel that many times they don't even listen or very minutely listen. And the pen comes out or the keyboard and all right, here you go. Here's your script.
We're overwhelmed. So the whole mental health, though, every single
Yes,
system
yes,
I'm aware of is completely overwhelmed.
you're right.
But this will make you feel better, and I hope people listen to me. Right, one of the top 10 causes of anxiety, dehydration. There are so when you're dehydrated, your body's under stress, you feel anxious, you have difficulty concentrating, difficulty eating, you lose energy. I'm not saying 90% of the time, but I'd say in about 5% of the cases. I can't tell you how many patients I've had over the years tell me they're depressed or they're anxious. The only thing they drink is Mountain Dew.
Okay.
So
Wow.
so a lot of times there are quick fixes, and I think healthy diet, healthy exercise, and for gosh sakes, get hydrated.
We could just end right now. You are so spot on. And especially when it comes to even teens, they just don't drink enough. You are supposed to drink half your body weight in ounces. So if you do the
Roughly,
math
yeah.
on that, yeah, roughly,
Yeah.
it's almost seems like that. How do you even do that? But you're supposed to. We're made up, 90 something percent of water.
Yeah.
And yes, 1 bill. And we're not even talking about being summer, where
But
you're,
it, it's just such a simple thing that most people don't think twice about it. And then other things, did you eat breakfast in the morning? Now, it's not the most important meal. I mean, scientifically, we figured that out. But if you have low blood sugar, right, because you haven't eaten, plus you're dehydrated, it's just a recipe for a bad day. So, look at what prime athletes do. I know we're in World Cup and in football. I mean, they hydrate, they eat their food so they can be at peak performance.
yeah.
So, and as a coach, I get to deal with that more as a life coach. If they have to see me as a substance abuse counselor, now we've gone past that, and now we're looking at other things. And another comment I want to make: most of those overdoses are not addicts. There are people who are either using something for the first time or they use it once every 2 months. They don't know that it's laced, or um, that they were given it, they didn't know that they were taking it. So many of the fatal overdoses we're having, they're not quote unquote addicts. They're just casual people who made a mistake. That's
Mm.
what keeps me up at night. That, as a counselor, I can work with my population and we do great work. We all do great work. But no, now it's affecting other people who don't classify as an actual addict.
Wow. And I just got a flash in my head that if you are an addict, call it a professional. You know what you're
Yeah.
doing because you've been doing it. But like you said, that one person just like, you know what? I have a little trouble coping. Oh, what do you have? Oh, let me try that. And then just like you said,
Yeah.
and that's where it ends right there.
Yeah.
Mm.
And at the same time, you have CBD stores and then Delta 8.
Delta
Please
8.
stop. We don't know what Delta 8 is, by the way. Just so everybody knows, it's not natural. They take it, I think it's an isomer of CBD. They chemically treat it, and that's how you get. We don't know what this stuff is, but we all want to feel better.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
And CBD, there's certainly a place for it, but you got to know what you're buying and
Yeah.
who you're buying it from. You go to the gas station, you're not getting probably the best CBD.
That's the best advice I've heard. Don't buy your substances from the gas station. That goes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The only
That
thing I think you should get at a gas station is maybe bottled water and gas.
Yeah, imagine that.
Hopefully I don't get sued by Sheets or something, but
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't worry about that. Um, and to your point with Delta 8, if you have too much, you're gonna it's like smoking weed. It's like taking, pure weed. And by the way, your point before in terms of marijuana now, as opposed to, let's say, when we were growing up. I've heard a number that it's 700% stronger than the stuff back in the day. I don't know if that's true, but
Well, the problem with that is the stuff from back in the day was what they call bunkweed from Mexico. There have always been, if you can look, you can find High Times magazines from like 1974. They call it volcannabis or something, something grown in Hawaii. So it was really potent. But nowadays, it's not just the weed. People are selling THC crystals that they're, we used to couldn't get good hash when I was growing up, but now they can just concentrate these things. So yeah, we marijuana. By the way, we do have fatalities from overdose of marijuana in children. Children are getting into parents' edibles, and I believe there's at least two cases I'm aware of where they overdosed. So it can be fatal, and no child should be anywhere near. So please keep your edibles locked up like you would a gun or your
yeah.
other medications. By the way, I'm an advocate for legalization, staunch advocate, because yeah, I think the criminal justice record going into the penal system, those repercussions are far, far, far worse than the side effects of the particular drug.
Mm.
So I am in favor of it and control. And we know what it's like the ABC stores here in North Carolina. You're buying actual liquor. You're not buying moonshine with the label slapped on it.
Well, okay, so that's a really good point. And what you were just saying before with Delta 8, you got people walking into that CBD shop and say, give me something that's going to do this for me. And then they wind up with a bag of Delta 8. They're not even sure what it is. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Scott, but Delta 50 is another one. And it's a combination of Delta 8, Delta 9, and Delta 10. And you want to blast off. That's your stuff.
It, it's just frightening. I used to
Yeah.
have hair. It was very long, and then I got into the profession. It just is. But it's also human nature to alter our consciousness. I get it. It's been happening since cavemen first discovered that funny mushroom outside of the cave.
Mm.
It's natural. It's just sometimes just because we can do something, we really should think, should we? And so many people are looking for escape either through the psychologist with the anti-anxiety, the antidepressant meds, and then the marijuana, recreational marijuana, and it's just ah, I think we're just plain addicted to taking something to do a quick fix. And
Well, I
I'm not
agree.
hardcore on that, but common sense does come in. That's scared. That Delta 50 thing, great.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also just what you said, that we're programmed that way because it comes from big pharma. So right away, prescriptions are easily written. And just what
Sure.
you said before, but you got a problem, you take something instead of taking a sip of water. You don't correlate that could make such a difference. With what you guys do with Kintsugi Life Coaches, if somebody's dealing with addiction or somebody in their family has those challenges, the type of coach you are a substance abuse coach and a life coach as well.
Yeah, so I practice substance abuse counseling in North Carolina. So it's highly regulated. So if somebody has a diagnosable substance use disorder, I have a private practice that's going great. I absolutely love it. And then I also work at another facility part time because I love group counseling. I can't get away from it. And then as a life coach, I can work anywhere in the world. One of the best people I ever worked with was a French national who was living in Ireland,
Wow.
and it was a great experience. But as a life coach, I'm pretty careful. I don't want to cry because I love my license and I'm a clinical supervisor. So that means I teach and train up and coming counselors. I don't want to lose that. So if somebody is using a substance, or again, video games, gambling, whatever, or if they're misusing it, I can work with that. If they're abusing it, if they've crossed that line, at that point, I try to get them to talk to a professional, but I don't diagnose. I won't treat the alcoholism or the marijuana. I'll just try to put enough, get them accustomed to talking enough
Hmm.
that they do want to seek out the help. So far, it hasn't been a problem.
Gotcha.
So,
Wow.
and as a recovery informed coach, mostly I'm working with people who have 2 to 3 years clean or sober, or they're 2 to 3 years into it. They can't get a counselor. Insurance won't cover it because they didn't relapse. But if they want someone who's familiar with the concepts of recovery and how to go about things, well, that's where a coach like me comes in.
Interesting. Final question on that recovery informed coach or coaching. How do you make the determination that you need a coach? If you're in that situation, let's say you're 2 years out, how do you decide?
I if I really that is one of those really great questions. Usually someone in their support system is going to mention it. Like like most coaching now, even though you go onto Facebook or anywhere and there's thousands of life coaches, we have an article, you can't swing a cat without hitting a life coach. But generally it's word of mouth, or people that you work with, they recommend folks. But us get, this podcast, this is how we do it, Steve, is people like me, the other wonderful, by the way, you have wonderful coaches on these podcasts, and
Thanks.
we're kind of addicted to listening to those. So we are getting the word out. And so if somebody is struggling with career, relationship, divorce, loneliness, and they don't really want to see a traditional psychologist or counselor or shrink, well, that's where we step in.
And how interesting that if it's somebody that had an addiction back in the day, but feels that they need a life coach to move their life
Yeah.
forward, you understand.
Yeah, because there is a lot. I'm in recovery myself. I've got 30 years of continuous sobriety, and I still carry that stuff with me. It's still in the parking lot doing push-ups while I'm sitting here talking about how I have recovery. So there is shame, there are issues. Plus, when you're in recovery, eventually you go back to school. Where if like me, you dropped out of college because of it, ooh boy, does that bring up the bugaboos. And that's where a coach like me or Julie can come in, do some positive reinforcement. And you know what, a lot of times if they can just find someone to talk to, a lot of times that's all it takes. Our clients aren't with us for years and years and years. There are times where 1 or 2 sessions and then maybe a tune-up every few months.
Mm.
So it's a different thing. I love it. I absolutely love doing it.
Yeah, it shows. Your passion shows there,
Thank
and you
you.
walk the walk. You've been there, you've dealt with it, and helping people, along the way. Website.
Kcoaches.com. That's the letter K, coaches.com.
And I'm going to ask you, I know you explained it last time. Final question here. Kintsugi life coaches is what you guys are.
Right.
Kintsugi means
So that's the Japanese art of repairing pottery. So, let's say you broke your coffee cup. You're either going to throw it away or you're going to get Gorilla Glue or Super glue, put it together. Kintsugi says, nah, man, turn it into another work of art. So
mm,
they'll have an adhesive with like gold or silver. I've also seen other colors like red. Turn it into a whole different work of art. However, make sure that it's drinkable.
gotcha. You just said, the analogy is fantastic because when you think about it, from time to time, we are broken, but
Yeah,
we are also a work of art. So sometimes you need an artist to
yeah.
help you with that.
So
Yeah.
we really love the name. We resonated with it. It does make it cumbersome. Like it used to be Kintsugilifecoaches.com, but hey, you can now get a URL, switch that to the domain. K Coaches was open, thank goodness.
Yeah.
As
Perfect.
Kintsugi Life Coaches, bit of a mouthful.
And I'm horrible at spelling. So kcoaches.com, I got that. Scott, great having you on. Thank you for all the insight and such important work and important talk today. And it's stuff that people don't talk about. So I'm glad we did.
I'm glad we did too. This is fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We'll get together next time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.